Let's go. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the February 3rd, 2021 regular governing board meeting of the Pima Community College District. Prior to our roll call, I'd like to make an announcement that we are having a little technical difficulty with our live stream to our YouTube channel. You may only be able to hear the audio. We're going to try, if the problem persists, we're going to try to make some adjustments throughout the meeting to move the person who's speaking to the top corner, so you should be able to see us. A full live video recording will be made available after the meeting on our governing board page. Always. Again, we apologize for the technical difficulty, but we feel it's important to move forward with the meeting this evening. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and do the roll call. Mr. Sylvan, could you read the roll?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Catherine Ripley.
Here.
Damian Klenko.
Here.
Maria Garcia.
Here.
Dr. Meredith Hay.
Present.
Luis Gonzalez.
Mr. Gonzalez, I believe you're muted, Mr. Gonzalez.
Here.
Okay, terrific. It looks as if all members are present. The next item on the agenda is our public comment and call to the audience. The Pima Community College Governing Board welcomes public comment on issues within the jurisdiction of the college. Generally, the total time for public comment will be limited to 45 minutes and comments will be limited to 3 minutes per individual. These time limits may be modified by the board chair or board. Individuals sharing comments are expected to communicate with decorum and respect. Individuals who engage in disorderly or use divisive or insulting language may have their time reduced or concluded by the board chair. At the conclusion of the public comment, individual board members may respond to criticisms made by those who address the board, may ask a staff to review the matter, or may ask that a matter be put on a future agenda. Members of the board, however, may not discuss or take legal action on matters raised during public comment unless the matters are properly noticed for discussion and legal action. Finally, be advised that internal college processes are available to students and employees for communication. This evening, we only have one member of the, one called the audience. It's Natividad Gonzalez. Mr. Gonzalez? Is Mr. Gonzalez there? Okay. Since we only have one item, I'll just give Mr. Gonzalez one more moment. Does anybody know if he's on the call or if we're able to elevate him?
I do not see him listed or as an attendee.
Okay. He provided some written comments to the board, so I will ask that that Andrea send those out to everybody. Our next item on the agenda are remarks by the governing board, and I have no remarks at this time. I will hand it to Mr. Gonzalez.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, the only remarks that I have is we started a new year, and I'm hoping this year is going to be a better year than last year because of the pandemic. And I know that we all want the best for our faculty, but more important for our students. And I wish all that we'll have a successful and productive year this year compared to the last year. I know that pandemic is a challenge, but with God's will, it'll happen. It'll be better than last year. Con el favor de Dios. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gonzalez. Dr. Hay.
No comment. Thank you.
Ms. Ripley.
No comment. Happy to be here. Thank you for those comments, Luis.
And Ms. Garcia.
I don't have a comment either. Well, maybe just welcome everybody, and I hope we get through this pandemic very soon. So.
Me too. Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move on to our administrative reports. We have a number of administrative reports this evening. The first is a COVID-19 vaccination rollout. Well, so first of all, just for clarification, before we move into that, I understand that Mr. had a conflict and we may need to move his item, and I see him on the call now. So would we prefer to move him up because you have a conflict later this evening, or
It's been resolved.
Oh, it's been resolved. Okay.
It's been resolved, so I'm good to go.
Okay. So if you don't mind waiting, what we'll do is we'll just continue, and then we'll circle back around.
Okay.
So we'll start with the COVID-19 vaccination rollout with Bill Ward, Vice Chancellor for Facilities.
Can you all see it?
Yes.
Excellent here. So, Chair Klinko, members of the board, Chancellor, student colleagues, and guests. Before I start moving forward with this presentation, I would like to introduce Dr. Francisco Garcia. He's the Deputy County Administrator for Community and Health Services and Chief Medical Officer at Pima County. And once I'm done with this quick presentation, we'll both be able to hopefully answer your questions. And so just to give the board an update, let's see here, if this is working here for me. Okay. Uh-oh. Hold on here. I don't know what happened here. So as you are well aware, we started our partnership last year with Arizona State University and Pima County, and we developed a number of testing sites. We started out with 3 sites. We actually opened up our West Campus as our first drive-through site in November 2016. And as you guys can see, we've had accomplished over 3,734 tests. And then we opened up Desert Vista and East Campus directly after the following month. And we've also completed 982 tests there, and East Campus 725. And then just recently, this beginning of this year, we opened the Northwest Campus, and as of this time, I don't have the numbers, but we are collecting that information. It has been running very, very smooth. We're really proud of it, and also to our partnership with the county and the Arizona State University. Also, too, as you guys know, we've worked hand in hand with Dr. Francisco Garcia's team. And so we've been meeting since last year to kind of try to look to see, you know, how this whole process would go. And so as you all are aware, there's been some emails that have gone out. I know Lisa sent them out last week, and then they're going to go out weekly to let our staff know that they're able to go on and work and register on the portal that the county has set up for the college. As we know, there's probably been close to 1,000 or more of our personnel that have already done so. And so we're really excited about that and continuously encouraging people to get out there and get vaccinated. Also, too, one of the things that we applied for last year was that hopefully Pima College could eventually be a site to administer the vaccine. We had talked with our county partners about a good year ago when this whole thing started. And so we filed our information with the state. They got back to us, asked us a few questions or wanted some more information. We provided that information to them. And as of 2 days ago, received confirmation from a couple of our partners, and I will have a meeting with them tomorrow related to about setting up West Campus as a potential vaccination site. And so that concludes my presentation with the team, and then hopefully we can answer your questions. And so Dr. Garcia, our board, I'm sorry.
Mr. Ward, thank you so much for the presentation. Are there questions from the board for Vice Chancellor Ward or Dr. Garcia? So
I'd like to know, I'm sorry, I'd like to know when the site's going to be working, the registration site. It's a mess.
I'm happy
Sorry.
to, no, quite all right. Chairman Klinko, President Lambert, or Chancellor Lambert, thank you for having me here today, and thank you for allowing us to sort of partner with you. Pima Community College is an essential institution within our community, and at this point, we are committed to continuing our partnership. We have stood up very quickly vaccination sites as well as testing sites. And we are carrying these out simultaneously during a period that is very operationally difficult for everyone. But we're particularly hopeful for the assistance on the testing side. I think that it is a mutually beneficial kind of arrangement. And at this point, even your Northwest side now has had over 500 tests delivered at that location. I'll turn over to vaccination because that is obviously an area of interest. What you need to remember is that we started vaccination in this county on December 18th. So a little bit over a month ago is when we started vaccinating in this county. Currently in this county, we have vaccinated nearly 120,000 individuals. That is 120,000 individuals have been received vaccination through the process. The way that we've done this is using a variety of modalities, using these fixed pods at TMC, at Banner North, Banner South, TCC, as well as the University of Arizona. These pods are serving anywhere between 500 to 1,500 individuals on a daily basis. Understand that the phasing of the vaccination is dictated from the Centers for Disease Control and from the Arizona Department of Health and Human Services. At this point, we remain in the 1B1 priority group, which is inclusive of individuals who are 75 and older, because those are the people that are more likely to die and have severe consequences. It is inclusive of law enforcement. It is inclusive of teachers and educators, and most recently, the governor has added an additional category, which we have not yet fully moved into, which is people between 65 and 74 years of age. So the way that the process is set up by its nature is distributed. And so different locations will have slightly different registration processes. The process for registration for educators is through the red cap link that you can find when you Google Pima County COVID vaccine. You will hit a landing page. And when you scroll through that landing page, it will say priority 1B, and you hit that button. And then you can identify where you fit in those priority groups, and it will take you to a form that allows you to fill out 5 data elements, I believe. Those data elements are collected and are batch transmitted to our partner TMC, who then generates new electronic health records within their system. As you might imagine, anytime that we do a health intervention in a healthcare setting, you actually have to have documentation, identity verification, and accountability for that, especially because this is a federal asset, and especially because we will not receive any more federal asset unless we can demonstrate that these assets are being moved through quickly. So that's the way the process is designed to work. After 3 to 4 days after you go on to that red cap link, you should receive a MyChart invitation from TMC, and it will say TMC MyChart will be the email address, and it will invite you to create a username, to identify a password, and to actually go onto the site to schedule your appointment. Because this process has been hectic and because this process has been a little bit rough, we've also provided some on-site registration capability at the Tucson Community Center in order to meet the needs of, especially of folks who are not particularly technologically savvy or who have internet access or literacy issues. We think that that's important. Effective last week on Wednesday, educators K through 12 and otherwise are able to create appointments either at the University of Arizona, at TCC, and next week we'll even have additional options. So that is the way the process is working currently. Currently, I can tell you we have vaccinated over 8,000 educators, which is quite a significant proportion of the folks that are in the system. Most of them have been K through 12 educators, honestly, and appropriately. But we are seeing a lot of folks also from the University of Arizona, from PCC, as well as from the trade and technical schools that train individuals in our community. We have made a commitment, the county administrator has made a commitment that we will vaccinate 100,000 people each month over the next 3 months. We have met and exceeded that goal in this month of January. We intend to meet and exceed that goal in the month of February and March. I believe that if we have the kind of vaccine supply that we need from the state and from the federal government, we are going to be able to vaccinate essentially 60 to 75% of the entire population of Pima County by the time we get to summer, by midsummer. So I am super excited and super happy to be able to share that with you, but I do so adding the caveat that this is all dependent on vaccine supply. This week rather, we received an allocation of approximately 30,000 doses. We are on track to expend every single one of those doses by early next week. We are expecting our allocation numbers. The state will be sharing those with us tomorrow. And again, if they are in that, general range in terms of the volume of doses, I believe that we will be able to do well. However, we actually have more capacity. We've built more capacity into the system so that if all of a sudden vaccine starts to flood the market, we are able to pick it up and quickly put it in the hands of partners who are quickly able to vaccinate a lot of individuals across this community. So that is where we are today. If you look at the state website, you will see that we have effectively delivered approximately 70, depending on the day, 70 to 80% of all the vaccine that we've received has already been delivered into people's arms, and that we are on schedule to meet that need. So I'm going to conclude my remarks there, open it up for questions, and happy to take.
Chairman Klinko?
Yes, so I have a question, and then we'll go to Dr. Hay, and then we'll go to Ms. Garcia, because I see a lot of hands raised. So Dr. Garcia, first of all, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time from your incredibly busy schedule to meet with us and to let us update both us and the Pima Community College community about what the county is doing as part of the rollout. We're very, very appreciative of all the work that's gone in to make this happen. Could you tell us, in terms of the vaccine rollout, when really we would expect to see the bulk of the PCC employees who have currently registered, when we would anticipate seeing them vaccinated?
So PCC employees who have currently registered should have received a MyChart account by now. If they have not, then there is an error either in the information that they provided or in the way that that information was transmitted. So, surprisingly to me, perhaps not to those of you who are educators, there's a fair amount of data entry error that goes on when people are entering information. And so if people have not received a MyChart account by now, have not received an email from TMC MyChart, it means that either the information that they entered was incomplete or incorrect, or the information was not transmitted adequately. So those individuals who are in that position, all they need to do is hit that red cap button one more time, re-enter, be meticulous about, especially the date of birth and the name and the last 4 digits of the social security number are the key identifiers that TMC is using to create these new accounts. And within about within 48 to 72 hours, there should be a response from TMC letting you know that they've received your information and that they have a valid information set to work on. So Right now, we have availability for vaccinations at our site. So if you got that link today and you hit that link, you will see availability both at the University of Arizona and at the TCC. You will not see availability necessarily at TMC. Banner is a completely separate system. You have to sort of hit the Banner link if you want to go through that system. And right now, the availability at Banner is a little bit limited. So that is where we're at today. My expectation is that before the end of the month, everybody who's an educator who wants to be vaccinated will be vaccinated.
Okay, that's terrific news. We really appreciate that update. Dr. Hay.
So I would like to, Chairman Klinko, publicly thank Dr. Garcia and the entire Pima County Health team working nonstop 24/7 for the last 14 months on this horrendous issue. And it's just so amazing what you have done, Dr. Garcia and your team. I'm just so very proud to have you in Pima County and leading the way. And so thank you for all you've done.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hay. Ms. Garcia.
Well, I want to thank him because I didn't realize that they were taking people that didn't have internet access. And that was a real concern of mine, because a lot of people, I don't even think they're aware that they can just, that they can go in and there's some slots available. And I think probably that needs to be communicated a little bit more within the community. I know right now the focus is on our first responders and our educators, but further on down the line, there probably has to be a little bit more communication on that. Anyway, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. And I know it's difficult. I've been trying to get my vaccine for the last 3 weeks, so I know how hard it is. Okay, thank you.
Chairman Klinko, Ms. Garcia, a couple of things that I will share with you. Because we have a very diverse and heterogeneous community, we have to have a lot of different doors that people can walk through. And so, in fact, if you use your smartphone, and most people have smartphones, not everyone, but if you use your smartphone and you Google COVID vaccine Pima County, there's also a landline number to our call center. That call center is staffed by 20 operators whose job it is to help figure out just how technically savvy you are and whether you will be able to make it through that process. We actually hold the hands of people who are not able to make it through that process for whatever reason, be it literacy, be it language barriers, be it whatever. We literally hold their hands through the process, and in fact, are able to appoint them directly into available slots. It does take being on the phone. Today, our call wait, however, was less than 6 minutes, and we responded to over 1,500 calls.
Wow.
So I think we're doing pretty well. It's not perfect. I also want to encourage you to look at our website because maybe your neighbor is not particularly computer literate, but all of us have a social network that includes people with differential abilities to access this kind of information. And you can be a really important conduit for how they do that. One of the questions that has come up from neighborhood associations is, what is it that we can do to help our elders get through the process? And my consistent question has been, offer them a hand when they're at the computer screen, because we're seeing people make some fairly simple errors. I just looked at a situation, 75 plus couple who were very good about documenting everything they've done. And on January 14th, January 15th, got onto RedCap. On January 18th, 19th, they had something back from TMC My Chart. On January 20th, they called TMC to say, where's my chart, which TMC appropriately said, you got one. All you have to do is hit the link. And they resent that email. Of course, these people share this with me. So I see the email with the actual link. The folks didn't understand that what they needed to do was click that link and actually schedule an appointment. And I get it. You know, my mom is more than 75 years old. I helped her through the process. So yes, people with differential abilities will need differential levels of support, and we're hoping to be able to provide that.
Thank you.
Councilor Lambert, you have your hand raised, and then
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Dr. Garcia, first of all, I want to say thank you to you and your team for all the support you've provided the college. I mean, during this very difficult time, that relationship we have with you and the team really has made a big difference in terms of how we make our decisions on the ground. So I just want you to know that. So as we look at the current criteria, a lot of them are still in the red, not met. So when do you, given the numbers you see currently, when might we see those moving out of the red category, maybe into the yellow and obviously into the green? What time frame, provided people continue to exercise good hygiene, et cetera?
So Chairman Klinko, Chancellor Lambert, a couple of things. So those are really super important questions to sort of grapple. And I think that I would think of them separately. There's the issue of how and when you resume instruction, and what does our disease burden look like in our community. Until about a week ago, I was unwilling to say that we were improving, that our metrics were improving. But now for the third week in a row, the number of cases per 100,000 has dropped. We are not yet to the level that we need to be, which is 100 cases per 100,000. We are in fact at approximately 400 or 500 cases per 100,000 on a given day. So you know, we are not where we need to be. In terms of the test positivity, that is also trending in the correct direction. We want to be in a test positivity range of approximately less than 5% of our tests coming back positive. Right now, we are in the mid to low teens. We have been as high as 28%. So this is a tremendous improvement over approximately the last month or so. Finally, the final criteria is COVID-like illness, and that is the number of people who are presenting to hospitals and emergency rooms with COVID as a diagnosis. That is also trending in the right direction, and I believe is going to move positively. What I have told the superintendents when I meet with them, and it's a similar set of concerns, is that I do anticipate being closer to those threshold metrics starting toward the end of this month. I really believe that most of those metrics will start to be either in the yellow, zone, and it'll take us a while to get to the green zone. The separate decision with regards to instructional activity and instructional models is a completely kind of different conversation. That the decision to engage in whatever model of instruction, whether it's in person, hybrid, or entirely virtual, that's a really complicated conversation. And you guys are the educational experts, and I would never dream of telling you how to do your job. What we do know based on the science, what we do know based on the case investigation and contact tracing that we're doing is, excuse me, is that most infections are not occurring in classroom settings. Certainly, most infections in the K-5 arena are not occurring in classroom settings. I would even be willing to say most infections in general among people who are school age, inclusive of university age, are not occurring in school settings. Most infections are occurring either at home or in educational settings, or are associated with attending gatherings of 10 or more people. We're seeing that consistently in our case investigation information. We're seeing that consistently across the country. We're seeing that actually out of the UK, very good, out of Israel, very good data, all of which say schools are relatively safe places when you put into play good, strong mitigation measures, when you create nice space between people, when you make sure that you are circulating the air appropriately, when you're making sure that you're encouraging teachers and students to stay home when they're sick, when you do all those meticulous things, and mask wearing, obviously, when you do all those things, schools can be a relatively safe place in comparison to a lot of other locations. I certainly would prefer for folks to be in that setting than in a bar setting, for instance, for the purposes of disease transmission. So I think that that's what you were getting at. And we totally appreciate the partnership that we have with Pima Community College, and we are happy to be supportive in whatever way we can.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garcia. The final word to Mr. Ward, and then we have to move along because we have a very hefty.
Yes, I just wanted to ask Dr. Garcia, thank you, Chairman King. I just wanted to ask Dr. Garcia one more question. And we've been getting a number of questions that are consistent. And one of the big ones we get all the time is, how long do you anticipate, social distancing, wearing PPE? Pima has been really adamant about ensuring that that's not anything that's going to change anytime soon with us when it relates to being around, someone 6 feet or wearing their protective devices. What are your thoughts about that?
Excellent question, Chairman Klinko, Mr. Ward, super great question. So I don't believe that we will ever be back to normal. I believe that the days of people sort of being I don't believe that we will have this pandemic has fundamentally transformed the way that social interaction takes place across the board in a variety of settings. I do not believe that we will get to a place where there is absolutely zero mitigation. I expect environmental controls to continue to be strong. I expect us to do messaging when disease pops up around masking, hand washing, and staying at home when you're sick. I expect us to continue to do this for a good long time. I do think, however, that the game changes completely when we hit about a 70-75% vaccination rate, because at that level, at that time, we start hitting what I call community immunity, what some people call herd immunity. When you have a sufficient percentage of your population that's been vaccinated, that's protected, the likelihood that you're going to be rapidly infecting other individuals really does go down. And I think that's when you start relaxing. I believe that we can get to some level of community immunity before the end of the summer. I'm hopeful that we can have a near normal fall. So with still probably a little bit of mask wearing, with still meticulous hand washing, meticulous stay at home policies. But I think that we are headed for a near normal fall if we continue how we're moving forward.
Thank you very much, Dr. Garcia. That's a very hopeful way to end this presentation. I certainly hope. I would love to talk to you about the variants and a whole slew of other topics, but we short on time. Hopefully we can have you back again, or if we have additional questions, we can pass them through Mr. Ward, and we can connect again.
Happy to do it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Concludes my report.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. So moving on, what we'll do is we'll do the legislative update with Jonathan Payton. Mr. Payton, thank you so much for being patient. I wanted to make sure that Mr. Garcia could continue on with his urgent work across the county.
Hello?
Yeah, Mr. Payton, we can hear you.
Okay, I heard some other things in the background, so I'm up, I guess. I just want to make sure that's correct. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for being.
No problem at all. I wanted to talk about this legislative session. It's a very unusual session, as I'm sure you can imagine, as it's unusual for you, what's going on right now. There is a blanket ban on really entering the Capitol grounds. So except for lawmakers. So there right now, I've never seen it this way. You actually You can't testify in any of these committees in person, except for in select committees in the House, and they're requiring you have to be there. So that's a very unusual situation. And to sign up for the system, you do it at a kiosk, and you have to be signed up at the Capitol, but you can't go on the Capitol grounds. So it's very confusing for those of us who have to work there. There's a number of bills that I want to talk to you about. The first one in question is 2136. This involves adult education. It's sponsored by Michelle Udall. We're calling it the Goodwill Bill. What it does is it allows outside groups to offer high school equivalency education for adults. And Goodwill would be the recipient of this. The issue is that currently our adult ed system, from what I've talked to our folks about it, we get about a few $100s per student. But what they're saying that Goodwill and these other groups would get would be well over $6,500 per student. So because it would be under the kind of the K through 12 system per student, there's a huge inequity in the amount of money. And our issue with this bill is, how do you compare either they're not going to be able to do as good of a job or we're doing more with less, or we should be getting $6,500 per student. So that has to be, we have some serious questions about that bill. It's part of the issue though is Goodwill is sponsoring it. Obviously in the name itself, everyone loves Goodwill, but the policy we have some serious problems with. So that bill is making it through the system. We've met with lawmakers to talk to them about our concerns with that bill. The second major bill that I want to talk. Yes.
Jonathan, can I just stop you real quick? Just want to, Mr. Chair, just note something that's very important about this bill. Bill was designed to address a very serious problem in the state of Arizona. And that is, there are over 700,000 individuals in this state that do not have the high school equivalency. So the intent is good, but the way the bill is structured is where it's problematic.
And like I said, there's two ways to address it. One is they get the same amount we do, $200 per student, or we get the $6,500 per student. And given the state of affairs right now with the Arizona budget, I doubt that that's going to happen. That's second option. So, but there are some inequities built into the bill, legitimate issue and intent behind the bill, but some real inequities behind the bill as well. The second major thing that I want to talk to you about is dual enrollment. So there is this bill was going through the system. It had almost no opposition last year, HB 2021. It's one that we were supporting. The chair of education, also Michelle Udall, sponsored the bill. It died because of the pandemic. Like many bills did last year, they adjourned before many of these bills ever got a hearing in the opposite chamber. So the bill is back again, and we're hoping that it'll pass. Another major issue that we're going to be seeing this year is a four-year baccalaureate for community colleges. This is being pushed primarily by Eastern Arizona and Maricopa. The universities were very much against this last year. We, as a community college, have, the chancellor can talk about this at length, but we have relationships with our university as well as with other universities. So it isn't as much of an issue, but for some of the rural areas, they look at it as a way to keep their students home. In addition, we have, that's one huge bill that is going to be going through the system. We have not, I don't think we have taken an official position on the four-year degree, but I know that it's going to be out there. So I just wanted to inform you about that four-year baccalaureate, and you may hear something about it. Another big issue that we'll be addressing this year is the expenditure limitation. We're in a very different situation than we were a year ago because of the passage of your local ballot measure to address the expenditure limitation. Right now, we're certainly supportive of the bill. Part of it is going to be more addressed towards the pandemic and the temporary expenses, possibly trying to take away any penalties for violating the expenditure limitation for a given amount of time during the pandemic. But it's not going to have a huge impact because of the passage of that ballot measure in Pima County. I think the biggest issue that we're working on is the non-credit bill. The number on that is 2597, HB 2597. That bill is a top priority for us because of the arrangements we have with companies like Caterpillar and others. Those companies, we don't get the footsie credit for those students, and this bill would allow us to do that. We'd be able to pursue grants. It would also count in our favor for the expenditure limitation, and it would encourage a lot more partnerships with job creators throughout the state. And the final issue that I think is important, just for you to understand some context, the Prop 207 passed this past election cycle, and I have already gotten a lot of questions from lawmakers about how much money each of the community colleges are going to be receiving. Certainly, how much are we receiving? I think Dr. B can answer this, but I think it's around $2 million at the moment. It may increase in the future. It's important for us to understand because when we talk to them about our budget issues or getting back into the state formula, their lawmakers are inevitably going to bring up the passage of this ballot measure. And they're going to say, and I've already heard them say this, you've gotten a lot of money because of the passage of Prop 207. I don't think they realize it's not really a lot of money. It's only $2 million at this point, but it is out there, and I think it leaves a bad taste in a lot of their mouths because they believe incorrectly that the community colleges were lobbying or campaigning for the Prop 207, which was unpopular at the Capitol. I've educated them that we were not involved as a college. Certainly individual board members, you may have your positions, but the college itself was not involved in campaigning for that. And so that's kind of what's happening at the Capitol. Those are the bills that we're focusing on. And I'd be willing to answer any questions you might have.
Are there any questions for Mr. Payton? Okay, thank you very much. We look forward to the continual updates from
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Chancellor Lambert. I struggle. I cannot see your hand raised because of the
okay. No problem. No problem. First of all, I just want to thank Jonathan for all he does for Pima Community College. Thanks to Jonathan, we've been successful over the last few years, as you all know, to get some key legislation passed, get some key funding support and the like. I also want to recognize Libby Howell as well. I mean, Libby is our on-the-ground interface, and she keeps everything moving and so forth. So thank you, Libby. Just want to add a few finer points on something that Jonathan said. So we're not opposed to the 4-year baccalaureate degree. What my concern has always been was there were no guardrails to protect the interest of the students. I believe in this iteration of the bill, they have put in guardrails now that will protect the interest of the students. In other words, that a district isn't going to just offer a bachelor's degree just to offer a bachelor's degree, that there are actually jobs out there if you take those bachelor's degrees, so that if you have to incur a loan, you can pay that back. So that's an example that there will be quality. There was market research done that there's a need for it. So I just wanted to emphasize that, but also to Jonathan's point, we have such great relationships with our universities here in our community at this point, not that Pima would move down this path, but I also want to make sure that Pima's position, should it ever decide that it could take advantage of that opportunity. On the non-credit piece, and it gets sometimes folks get hung up on non-credit versus credit. Where the world of work is going, the world of learning is going, that the distinction is being blurred. And a case in point of that is the Google IT professional assistant support certificate is a case in point. Some schools are offering it non-credit. Some schools are offering it credit. It's the same thing. So why would we draw a distinction between the two? And so that's where the world is going. Skills required, degree optional. And you'll hear a lot of this at the national level as part of the conference. So we're just trying to make sure that our state starts recognizing and rewarding and incentivizing our colleges. Other states actually provide resources for non-credit. So our state is lagging behind where some of the national trends are going. And then the last thing, that Prop 207, we can't underscore that enough. We're going to have to overcome the perception, but also there is a reality that at the state capitol that we're just going to have to continue to work through. So thank you, Jonathan and Libby.
Thank you both so much. Okay. Next, we're going to do we'll discuss the reentry plan, summer and fall 2021 with Dr. Dolores Duran-Certa, the Provost and Executive Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, and Dr. David Doré, President for Campuses and Executive Vice Chancellor for Student Experience and Workforce Development, and Bill Ward, the Vice Chancellor of Facilities again.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes? Okay, excellent. So hello, Board Chair Klinko, members of the board, Chancellor Lambert, students, representatives, colleagues, and guests. Before I start, I also want to thank Dr. Francisco Garcia. I think he's already left, but what the information he shared is hopeful, and it's a good lead into our presentation.
Yes.
So I'm presenting with my colleagues, Dr. David Doré and Mr. Bill Ward, on the 2021 summer and fall scheduling and reentry planning. So from the beginning, as you know, our priority has been, in the beginning, now, and in the future, health and safety of our students and our employees. That is our #1 priority. So every decision we make, the data that we analyze, the feedback we get from our stakeholders, that is our main priority. Of course, we follow the CDC guidelines, the Pima County guidelines, state and national guidelines, and any adjustments that they make, we also make. It's a fluid situation. It's a delicate dance where we make a decision one day and then it can change the next day. So we're very aware of that and try to follow all of the processes that we need to. And then, of course, following the health and safety protocols that go along with that, the PPE, the temperature checks, washing our hands, all of that comes into play. We've established a Pima vaccination strategy group, and we meet pretty much on a weekly basis. And I'm happy to say that this week we have 2 new members that have joined us. One is our Dean of Health Professions, Yolanda McCoy-Stokes. And then we also have a faculty representative, EMT faculty, Brandy Randolph, and he's also a faculty senate officer. So we wanted some additional perspectives from the health related field. So we're very happy that they have joined us too. We also look at the local community and national surveys and reports that are constantly coming up, the data that we see. The STAR office created and sent out a prospective student survey. So these were students that are people who are thinking to come to Pima, and their thoughts about scheduling and about how we deliver the course modalities. And so we're accumulating all of this data as we make decisions. And of course, feedback from our students, faculty, deans, staff, and administrators. So we'll start off with the summer. So our plan for the summer is to continue just as we are now, same as the spring, virtual and online with a handful of hybrid courses. And I'd now like to pass it on to my colleagues, Dr. Doré and Mr. Ward, for their reentry plans.
Thank you, Dr. Duran-Certa. So as Dr. Duran-Certa stated, we're going to maintain the same process in the summer as we did for the spring semester. Where we're going to present some scenarios will be in the fall schedule. So pretty much everything's staying identical for the summer, and then the summer would be used to prepare for any changes. And so Dr. Duran-Cerda, if you want to go to the fall schedule now.
Yes, so thank you. So for the fall schedule, we have the plans of having 3 different scenarios, and I'm very grateful for our vice provost and the deans and the campus VPs and the facilities team who are working together. And of course, we're involving our faculty department heads in these creations or establishing 3 different plans or 3 different scenarios. So one is plan A is full operation of post-COVID new normal. As Dr. Garcia said earlier, you know, we're never going to go back to how we were before. There's always going to be some precautions that we have to take. And so this would be the post-COVID new normal. Plan B is to open up to 50% of the college at any given time. And that's not only the classes and the faculty and the students, but that also includes student affairs, our advisors, our counselors, the staff, academic support, that's the learning centers, tutors, libraries, etc. So that's that scenario. And then the third scenario is to pivot back to what we are right now, virtual and online with a handful of hybrid courses. So with that, David and Bill?
Yes, so essentially with plan A, we will not be able to continue the current safety protocols. And so that would be a significant change for us to fully open our campuses. And there's some reasons for that. We have been adhering to very strict protocols, which go all the way to our public restrooms, to isolating cohorts so that there is not cross-contamination, et cetera. Those kinds of protocols would not be possible to keep in place with a full schedule. In the 50%, the biggest challenge, if we go to a 50%, we'll be able to maintain, of course, in any scenario, we're going to continue to require masks. But with a 50%, it's not feasible to maintain 6 feet the way all of our classrooms are structured. That would only allow us in most of our classes at a maximum of about 8 students, which is not particularly feasible. And so we would have to release some of the 6 feet social distancing. We'd need to make some adjustments to that. And then of course, plan C, we would continue being able to maintain the strictest social distancing, all of the entry protocols that we currently have in place. And so our plan is to adhere to, and I think Dr. Duran-Cerda stated that, under any of these, we are going to adhere to the current CDC guidelines, the Pima County guidelines, and state and national guidelines. And so that will determine which of these options is most feasible. Now, Dr. Garcia left us with a very optimistic prediction for the fall, which I think would allow us to have some adjustments and then therefore maybe look at the 50%. And then I'll turn it over to Bill.
Yeah, what I would like to add, board, to what we're talking about now is one of the things too that we're going to need to consider, especially if we do expand, our percentage, is right now, as both Dolores and Dave have said, we're able to manage what we have now. But as we start bringing more people to the college, then that means that our protocols that we have in place will have to expand. And I'll just take an example. Like right now, we have a contract custodial operation, and what we've been able to do with our contract custodians is we pinpoint where they're cleaning, and so they clean in areas that the college is utilizing. But they're not going to areas all the time that we're not utilizing. And so the idea would be if we bring more people back, then that regimen would need to stay the same, which in a sense the college could incur more cost related to it. And the same thing with our temperature checks and things like that. The college is, we are looking at technology for that, but the way that it works now, as you all know, as people go through a temperature check, they get a ban, and then they get to get in. And so depending on whether that is relaxed for the college, that would be something that we would still have to have in place. And so as both Dave and Dolores have stated, is that the horizon, hopefully the horizon does look better for us, but and I think that Dr. Garcia also stated that these PPE and social distancing guidelines and things like that somewhat would still have to stay in place. And so that's kind of how we're looking at it. The goal would be is we would want to be able to open up, but as the chancellor has said from the start, and it's going on a year now, that it's always been about saving lives.
And just to give a concrete example, the Aurora Room at the 29th Street Center, that holds over 100 people. And with our strict social distancing guidelines now, we have maxed that out at only 25 students. And we simply don't have those kinds of large classrooms all over the district.
Agreed. And then to add to what Dave just said too, is remember when we assess a site, or say we assess an area, we have to now not just look at it for, we always have looked at it based on our disabled. And so just to understand that we still have to look at these areas based on our disabled that are coming to class, plus the social distancing related to COVID. And so it's not an easy thing to do. We are working very hard at coming up with recommendations and full-fledged plans and monitoring what's happening out there literally by the hour, what's happening in our community. But we are optimistic, but we want to make very clear that we're not going to make a recommendation to the chancellor and to the board if we don't feel comfortable with being able to manage what we're talking about.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Any questions for us?
Are there any questions from the board members? Nope. Okay, we really appreciate the work and keeping us up to date, and hopefully we can get very quick updates as the situation progresses and we have a better understanding. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, so we are running a little bit behind schedule. So, I really want to chart holding everybody to the 5-minute allotments of time. The next presentation is our new community relief dollars with Libby Howell, our Executive Director for Media, Community and Government Relations. Ms. Howell.
Thank you. So the new federal relief dollars are called CARISA, which stands for Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations. So let me share my screen with you and I'll get into the details. Okay. So CARISA was part of a huge 5,000-page Appropriations Act that included, lots of things having nothing to do with higher ed. It included increases to the Pell Grant program, and it added the FAFSA Simplification Act, which was sponsored by Senator Lamar Alexander before he left office. The total bill was $900 billion. So before I get into CARISA itself and what it means to Pima, let me tell you a little bit about some of those added things that are also important to us. So regarding Pell Grants, the maximum grant will go up $150 per person as of July 1st, which will boost the maximum grant to $6,495 for the 21-22 award year. Remedial ed, or as we call it, developmental ed, will be eliminated from the 12-semester Pell lifetime limit. That's important to many of our students. As you know, many of our students don't come completely college ready. They need a little extra time to get up to snuff in reading, writing, and math skills. So that will be really important to them. It also extends second chance eligibility for incarcerated students if they are attending nonprofit accredited institutions. And of course, we do serve those incarcerated students, so this is also positive that they'll have access to Pell. It provides a $25 million increase in work study and in federal supplemental education opportunity grant funding. So these are all positive things. The part that applies directly to Pima, the Carissa, refers to, includes a $22.7 billion allocation for higher ed. K-12 gets $54 billion, and then there's also a governor's emergency relief fund, which is about $4 billion. So we're looking forward to more information about that because it includes some language about additional dollars for technical training. So let's see what it means to Pima specifically. Pima is going to receive about $22.5 plus million. The amount that goes to students must be at least the same as the amount that went to students for the CARES Act. In our case, that's almost $5 million, and it must go directly to students. However, there is a language change this year that gives us the option to apply some of those dollars directly to a student's account if, and this is an important caveat, if we receive the student's permission to do that. In the CARES Act, all of the student money had to go directly to the student, and the student would then have to turn around and apply money towards tuition. Getting the student's permission may be more trouble than it's worth. We're talking about that. We don't know exactly how we'll handle that. So as you can see, the big difference is what we get for institutional support, and it's $17.6 million. This allows institutions a broader method of applying the funds, and I'll get to that in just a second. And then the other big surprise is we got a birthday present. The Department of Education discovered that some of the CARES Act funds were not fully allocated, so they've decided to distribute those remaining funds as well. And so from those federal undistributed CARES Act funds, Pima will get over $560,000, which brings our total to $23.1 million. This is a huge benefit to the college. I also would like to mention that Pima's allocation is the largest allocation of any of the community colleges in the state. That's if you consider the colleges that are part of the Maricopa system as individual community colleges, because this money is allocated per college, not per district. So Pima's amount is larger than any of the other community colleges. And the other kind of interesting trivia fact that I'll tell you is that ASU received a whopping $120 million plus allocation, making it the largest university allocation in the nation. So you can see that Arizona did pretty well for ourselves. So let's talk about what's different besides the money. For one thing, we don't have to apply for this allocation from Carissa. We do, however, have to submit a year-end report to the federal government explaining what we did with our CARES Act money, and I really have to give kudos to my colleagues Lori Wright, who is the head of our grants department, and to Norma Navarro Castellanos, who's head of financial aid. They worked very hard on our year-end report. It's already submitted. So Pima is standing in good stead to wait for our allocation dollars. And I have to call out their staffs as well, because Pima was the first community college, in fact, the first higher ed institution in the state to distribute our student money from CARES Act. And that really got the attention of members of Congress and, in fact, some local officials. It really showed how committed we are to student success and to provide them any kind of resources that we are able to help them be successful. So why did we get so much more money this time around than the last time? The allocation formula has changed. Last time in the CARES Act, 100% was based on FTSE. This time, 50% is based on FTSE and 50% on headcount. And we really do need to thank the American Association of Community Colleges for lobbying for that change. They really went after this, and it has had a huge impact on community colleges. The other thing that is different is it contains more flexible language to allow us to access that money. Of course, it has to go to defray expenses that are directly related to the coronavirus, but now that can include different types of funding. So for example, it could include lost revenue, expenses that are already incurred. It can apply to lost tax and tuition revenue, and possibly to state budget cuts. If a state cuts its educational funding because of lost revenue due to the coronavirus. Now, that doesn't have a direct impact on Pima, of course, because we do not receive operations support from the state, neither does Maricopa colleges, and we have not for about the last 5 years. The other important thing I want to mention is that about 89% of the higher ed pot will go directly to public and nonprofit institutions, whereas only 680 million, that's about 3%, will go to for-profit institutions. That's a big change. The bill also provides about 1.7 billion, or that's about 7.5% of the overall funding, to minority serving institutions. So our allocation will include that, is calculated based on that appropriation as well. So with that, let me stop sharing my screen, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Are there questions for Ms. Howell? Okay, I have a question. So, and I think this is to the Chancellor. So in terms of, the next steps for how this money is allocated and spent, what is the process? Will this just be rolled into our standard budget process where there's an explanation of how we are, how it's restricted and how we can use it? Is there opportunities for direction from the board to focus on different components or elements of concern? One thing I wonder is, can this, again, I think we're all concerned about enrollment, and when we've seen, 20 to 25% shedding of our enrollment, can we use money to help reach out to those individuals, really an entire cohort that's being left behind because of the pandemic, to figure out strategies to get them re-enrolled and then support their continuous enrollment? So those are sort of some questions I have, but Chancellor Lambert.
Sure. So, Mr. Chair, so what we're envisioning is that first half, well, that's not half now, but that first piece around the students, that it will take probably a very similar trajectory as the last or the initial first round, but then it's that lion's share of the money. And so Dr. Dave B is going to speak about that here shortly. And so he will talk about how we want to approach that. And obviously getting the feedback from the board is going to be key to that piece of the equation. So I'll just reserve for Dave to address that latter piece. I just want you to know we're going to move as quickly as we can, like we did last time. We realize that students are hurting, and they're hurting right now. So as soon as we can get direct deposits into their accounts, the quicker we can help make a difference for them.
Okay. Thank you very much. And Ms. Howell, thank you very much for your work. And again, thank you for the acknowledgement and recognizing the full team effort to get the monies to, sent out during the early days of the pandemic and the impact that has had on students. And I'm thrilled to see the financial support coming for the institution and the recognition from our federal government. So thank you very much. Our next item is our fiscal year 2021-2022 budget update, implications of the CARES Act and the Carissa funds, with Dr. Dave B., Executive Vice Chancellor for Financial Aid and Administration. Sorry, Finance
Chairperson Klenko.
Financial Aid.
Chairperson Klenko, members of the board, Chancellor Lambert, colleagues, guests. We whipped up this presentation in the last 2 minutes based on the questions from Chairperson Klenko. Actually, no, we anticipated that some of these questions would come up. So I won't go through this whole presentation because I know we're running short on time, but I will definitely address the questions that came up and sort of follow up on what Ms. Howell presented a few minutes ago. Without question, the Carissa funds coming in are going to be a great assistance to the college. It's going to be folded into the budget process. And it's really important to understand, both with CARES and with Carissa, that the timing of the funds delivered, they both have stipulations that they follow these certain, like a year, you have a year to spend the funds. And so it puts some restrictions on how we use the money But the limitations are they're just a little bit quirky. And there are, with CARES in particular, it was more restricted in terms of what we could use the funds for than CARISA, and that is actually very welcome news and will help our budget immensely. So I'm going to boil this all down very quickly. As we've talked about with the board, there are very significant adverse impacts from COVID that we've been experiencing, principally around tuition and enrollment declines, things that we've chosen to do as an institution where we've reduced tuition costs by providing STU classes for free. We had the fall rebate program. And then other ancillary revenues are going down pretty significantly. So, and that will continue to be the case. We're going to talk later this meeting about bookstore revenues, bookstore and food service revenues. And then investment revenues is something that also will be going down. So we've got a pretty significant reduction in revenues, and we've got some increased costs associated with responding to the pandemic. With CARES, what we've done so far is outlined there that we've invested pretty heavily in providing portable computing equipment to students. I'm talking, by the way, about the institutional share. The student share for CARES was about $5 million. The institutional share was about $5 million. Of that $5 million, a little more than half of it was directed towards technology for students. And then we also set aside money for test proctoring, for financial literacy education assistance. And then we've also used some funds from CARES for reimbursement for some of the facilities remediation costs, PPE equipment, and IT costs for increased licenses that we have. So we have a plan for how to spend the CARES funds. We've spent most of it, but we still have 3 months. And there's a group right now working to figure out how to spend the remaining CARES funds in the most effective way possible. And that includes using CARES funds for reimbursing for expenses that we've already incurred, but just identifying which things those are. So we had estimated that proctoring expenses could be as much as $800,000. The true cost of that is dramatically lower. So we're making adjustments for that, and that sort of frees up some resources. Going forward, what we've done is put together a pretty wide-ranging group of folks to talk about and brainstorm ideas for use of the CARISA funds. And that's where we're going to fold these ideas into the budgeting process. Some of these include, obviously, we will have continued direct student aid. We're looking into ideas including book allowances, so providing scholarships for students from CARISA funding, in continuing some of the additional costs, proctoring expenses. We also, and this is one of the quirks that I mentioned, that one of the most popular things that we did was purchase Wi-Fi hotspots for students, and then we're lending them out. The demand is greater than the supply right now. And so what we're going to be doing, knowing that the CARISA funds are coming in, we're already looking to buy more of those pieces of equipment. The challenge was with the CARES funds, you had to have the expenses had to finish up by May. And when you're talking about purchasing something that's on an annual license, that you're paying it out over the course of to continue that past May, we would have folded that into the budget. Now we can use CARISA funds for that. So we're working to get more hotspots available for students right away. Other things that we're looking at institutionally will be enhancing marketing. What I keep saying to the group is, or what I've said to the group is, we need to focus on how to get all of those students who are not coming to the college, right? Our enrollment is down. We need to make sure that we don't have that lost generation that was just referenced. There are continuing expenses on software licenses, and then prioritizing some projects like digitizing documents, making it more efficient at the college. Investing in high flex classrooms is one of the things that we'll be talking more about. If we go to a model where, and Mr. Ward and Dr. Doré and Dr. Duran-Cerda mentioned a few minutes ago, as we phase in, if we phase into a 50% or above model, and we continue to have the social distancing practices, it's going to cut down how many students can fit in classrooms, and we will incur costs associated with that. So we're going to be working on how does that fit within the model, and how do we make sure that we provide the students with the classes that they need. And that might come at additional costs. And fortunately, the Carissa funds will help offset that. We've also talked about work from home costs. We're also looking into a system that would provide essentially ongoing, I don't want to say the word the wrong way, but sanitizing classroom space on an ongoing basis. And as mentioned a few minutes ago, also, if we scale up the students coming back, in order to scale up, there's going to be additional costs, whether it's technology for checking students in to make sure that they're coming in with no symptoms, et cetera, or other procedures and protocols will have additional costs associated with that. So as those get defined and as we identify what the needs are, we will be taking that to the board as part of the budget, the normal budget cycle. With that, that's this part of the presentation. I will also add that we are going to have a study session on the 15th. And we'll get into all of these. We'll be going through all of these things again, and all through the spring as we develop the budget. But the really good news is there's a significant amount of money that's going to help us offset these costs and help us get our students back into the classroom and back into their education.
Are there any questions for Dr. B on this part of the presentation? Yes, Ms. Garcia. You're muted though. Still muted, Ms. Garcia. Can someone help? Oh.
Got it. Okay. A couple of questions that I had. Dr. B, is it cheaper to do hotspots or to provide internet service? Which is less expensive?
Generally speaking, the hotspots are providing internet service. So it's providing it provides a mobile device that gets you connected to the internet. So it essentially is providing the internet service for you through this mobile device, and you can take this mobile device in different places. And there are different ones. Some connect to cell service, some connect to satellite service. And the good news is, and we're exploring this right now, that there may be a new technology coming out that is actually even more affordable than what we've been using. So we're exploring that, and we'll give you more information as we know and go forward with the purchase.
Okay, and then the other thing is the new software licenses that you put here. Is that existing things that already existed software, or is it new software?
Well, and so going back in time, things like adding Zoom licenses is one of the things that we're talking about. So, and then continuing the costs of things like Zoom licenses. There are other academic technologies that as faculty have been experienced teaching virtually and online, that they're finding that they need some additional tools. So it's those kinds of technologies. In addition, administratively, there are some systems that are, as we've been working from home, we've been able to identify better ways to do business. And some of that is through the use of additional software packages. Most of it, but some of the stuff that I'm talking about would be stuff you're really familiar with, like Zoom licenses. It's just we have additional costs that we've incurred because of the pandemic and because of how we're teaching. But Menti is another one that has been mentioned, that getting an institutional license that allows you to interact with the students and ask them questions and have them respond on the fly. It kind of creates an interactive experience, which I think the board may have seen, because Nick Richmond uses it really effectively in some of the work that she does. And so it's sort of a live surveying and asking questions of students, and it's a good way to keep the interaction going with students. Those are the kinds of things that we're talking about.
Thank you. My last question is work from home costs. I happen to be aware of some of the staff people that in the beginning of the pandemic did not have internet access at home. And there's an increased cost to them staying home and working from home. And I just wondered if there's any consideration being given to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's on the list. That's one of the things that we're talking about, and staff council has mentioned it. That in some of those cases, we've actually provided technology to folks working from home. We've provided some of the hotspots. We've provided laptops to individuals who didn't have that kind of technology from home. So we've sort of responded as needed. And then on an ongoing basis, a lot of our employees are working from home, and you incur some additional costs. So we'll be exploring that and talking with the board about that. That will be a board level decision, talking about when we go into class compensation and those kinds of decisions about how to approach next year for wages and so forth.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. Are there any other questions? Okay, hearing none. Dr. B, if you'd like to move on to the comprehensive financial report for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020.
All right, Chairperson Klinko, members of the board, Chancellor Lambert, colleagues and guests, good evening again. It is my pleasure to provide a brief summary of the college's annual financial report for fiscal year 2020. The report was sent out to the board in December. That's when it was formally published. It's posted also immediately on the State Auditor General's website, and we post it also on our own website. It is the culmination of a months-long process of finalizing financial transactions for the fiscal year, and then having that information reviewed and audited by the State Auditor General's office. As is indicated in the report, we received an unmodified opinion indicating that the information in the report is reliable and fairly presented. In other words, and according to generally accepted accounting practices and standards. In other words, that's a lot of almost gobbledygook for saying we had a clean audit, which is what we're looking for on any audit report that we get. Now, to quickly go through, and I know that we're running low on time. I will point out that we always go through the audit information in more detail with the Finance Audit Committee. And the Finance Audit Committee also has an opportunity to talk directly with the auditors, and they do that. They excuse the staff for part of that conversation so that there can be a direct conversation. Those are following best practices that came out of Sarbanes-Oxley and other basically accounting best practice standards that we've implemented with that Finance Audit Committee. The news is very favorable in the financial report. Revenues overall grew pretty dramatically by about $30 million year over year. A couple of key things were behind that. One is the tuition and fees in fiscal year 20 grew. That was primarily due to the increase in the tuition rate that was set. So remember, this is the year ending June 30. So we're going back in time. So next year it will look quite different in terms of our tuition because our tuition revenue is going down significantly because of COVID. But last year we had a slight increase in tuition. We did see some reductions in our other expenses, and that was related to COVID and the response that it was only 3 months of the pandemic in this fiscal year, but there was an impact on some of our ancillary revenues as I've discussed already. Property taxes went up. That was all planned and budgeted as expected. Federal grants went up. That's principally related to the CARES Act funds coming in. And then investment income went up. And again, that was planned and known at the time that they were going up. The most significant increase, and this is worth noting, is that the $15 million toward the bottom of the page is the state appropriation for the aviation facility. So that $15 million came into the college. We incurred some costs related to aviation, but not anywhere close to the $15 million. So this year we'll be having more expenses that are essentially being paid from the revenue we got last year. Okay, in terms of expenses, they also went up pretty similarly to how revenues went up. A lot of that is related to the construction and the costs related to building up our centers of excellence. In addition to that, there were some increases for employee expenses, known salary increases that we had put into place in that budget year. And then also the distribution of CARES Act funds. Those were the biggest increases in expenses. And then I'm going to shoot down. There's another page where it just summarizes it in a different way. You can see that travel expenses went down dramatically. Supplies and materials went down dramatically, but we had increased costs in some of the contractual services. Again, that's centers of excellence, but that's also related to some of the COVID-related expenses that we incurred. I want to focus on this page because this is the one that's the snapshot that we look at once a year and sort of it tells us about the long-term financial health of the institution. And this is overwhelmingly positive information. The overall net increase the overall increase in net position was significant this year, as you can see at the bottom. And then going through some of the various, sorry about the highlighting that. There's a pretty significant increase in our short and long-term investments. So that is, we have a net position. Again, some of it is we had the $15 million coming in from the state. We're holding on to that money until we spend it. But some of it is just strong financial performance that is going into now our reserves and our financial stability, basically, of the institution. So we have, we're increasing. We had a net performance that was positive. We're essentially putting that into our reserves, and then we're going to be talking with the board at upcoming meetings. I'm going to get into more detail about this at the study session, but having a board approved reserve policy where we actually look at what are reserves, what are our target reserves, and how are we going to use the reserves. Some of those we already have plans for. So the allied health building, I mentioned aviation, is that, we got the money up front and then we're going to be spending money down. Allied health is another one where we're setting aside funds. So we have a number of projects that we have in mind, but we're going to be talking with the board at the next few months about additional uses of some of those reserve funds while still maintaining a healthy reserve that we're expected to do both from a accreditation standpoint and also from our creditors expect us to have good, strong reserves on hand. So we'll talk more about that with the board. Want to sort of lead into that. Do want to focus attention down here. This is the first year that we have an unrestricted net position. That's sort of money that's not specifically set aside or restricted for other purposes and not otherwise invested in our capital plans. Our unrestricted net position is a positive $13.5 million this year. That's the first year it's been positive since the GASB change that required us to fold in the liability related to pension expenses, so Arizona State Retirement System and Public Safety Retirement System. So that was a big liability that came on our books about 5 years ago. And this is the first year, because we've been having such strong financial performance, we actually are now net positive when we account for that liability. That is a very strong positive piece of information. Then going forward, I'm just going to now skip ahead to the summary. I mentioned that it's an unmodified opinion. That is what you're looking for when we get the audit. That we had increases in total expenditures that were essentially planned. We had a significant increase in investment revenues due to diligent cash management and favorable interest rates that are, the interest rates we can't control, the solid cash management we can control. We had an increase in capital appropriations for aviation, as I mentioned, and the net position really indicates strong financial standings in addition to our college's reserves and investments. So again, and there are a couple slides down here where it talks about some things that we're going to be doing in the near future, including talking about that financial stability, talking more in detail about the budget, some of the goals, and what the revenue outlook is, what the expenditure outlook is. Again, with the Carissa funds, with Prop 207 funds, and with some what looks like going to be some pretty decent growth in new properties in Pima County. We do have some good revenue coming in that will help us offset some of the known expenses, and we will be able to, I think, put together some good priorities for how to really stabilize and help the students in the community. And with that, I want to thank the team that's involved in the audit. This is, again, I mentioned it occurs over a number of months where the auditors come in, they test expenses, they make sure that everything is done well. everything is accounted for appropriately, and again, to give the assurance both to the board, to the community, to our creditors, and the financial community that we are running a strong financial operation here at the college. I will also point out, this is new news from when we put this presentation together. The A133 audit was just published this week and was sent directly to the board. That is an audit specific to our our federal programs, and also includes what the internal controls and compliance information is. All of that is also an unmodified opinion. There is one finding that is a continued finding for the last few years. We've had a multi-year project in place to get our information technology processing and procedures up to a standard that was introduced a few years ago. We've talked with the board about this in the past, and also with the Finance Audit Committee. We think that we actually are very close to finalizing and getting that cleared up. But there are no other findings, which is also really good news for the institution. So we're about to clean up the one remaining one that we knew was going to take multiple years to get off of the findings, and there were no other findings related to the audit this year. Again, very great. This is very good news for the institution, and I'm really proud of all the folks who have been working diligently to make sure that we do things extremely effectively here at the college. With that, I'll ask if the board has any questions.
Are there any questions for Dr. B? Nope. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. B. We appreciate it. The next is our enrollment update with David Ariano, Dean of Enrollment Management. Dr. Ariano, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Klinko. Get set up there. So good evening, Chairperson of the board, board members, Chancellor Lambert, colleagues and guests. I'm going to provide a short update on our enrollment efforts since our last discussion. So our overall headcount, enrollment, and applications continue to be down, even despite our best efforts. But I do want to highlight that there is stable enrollment.
David, did we lose you? Mr. Ariano? We can't hear you, and we can't see you. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to come back to you. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry about that. And so I do want to highlight that we've had some stable enrollment occur within certain programs. So when we look at certain programs like accounting, bookkeeping, our EMT program, logistics, social services, vet tech, and especially our health-related programs, we do have some positive highlights there. Moving on a bit here, this is a follow-up to Board Member Garcia's request last session, where she wanted to look at enrollment by course modality. And so when we look at 2019, 2020, we look at those specific pie charts there, you're seeing an enrollment growth from 26% up to 30% term to term. And that really relates also to the slide that Nick provided at our last study session, where she was showing year-to-year enrollment growth in the online modality. And then when we fast forward to 2020-21 academic year, you can clearly see that we have kind of a mixture of what's going on. We have our virtual and our online, virtual, hybrid, online, and in person going on. So it's not a real direct comparison to last year. You can see the pandemic has shifted a lot of our modalities, and it also relates to some of the plans that our provost and campus president shared out today. And then finally, I wanted to share a little bit on our spring 21 virtual support for students. So we continue to do our enrollment and program advising. We continue to do improvements to our application, moving forward with the adult basic ed application, making that more of a seamless process for students seeking a GED or high school equivalency. We've continued moving from manual processes over to automated processes with our course to program of study. That is essentially making sure students are on track and are in courses related to their degree. And so it really decreases that time to completion, that credit bloat that we see in community colleges. And then really engaging with students from student life with our Zoom into 2021 events, our first year experience for students, our virtual Connect U and Career Cafe sessions, and then virtual tours and high school, virtual tours for high schools, and our drop-in hours that our recruiters are offering to the community. And then finally, I do want to leave you with a bit of student feedback. So even during our most busiest and stressful times, during our spring registration, we're still able to maintain a high level of customer service and student service. You can see we're about 94% satisfied, very satisfied in the service our enrollment and program advisors are providing. And then I also put for some student feedback, some of the comments that received directly for some of our advisors. So you can see, again, that high level of service is still ongoing for our students. And with that, I will open it up for any questions or comments you may have.
Looks like Ms. Garcia has a question. Yes.
Sorry. Okay. So one of the things that I would like you to do, and I'm not sure if you're the right person to ask this question, but I hear complaints about the registration process, that it's difficult. There's too many tabs to go through or whatever. I don't know. I've thought about registering just so that I can see how it works. If you could please look into that and see what the issues are, either talking to the people that are actually handling that, and then give you some feedback on it.
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely look into that. So we use our student information system banner, and so we can reach out to our registrar's office to see if there's any follow-up for you.
Talk to the people who are working it, please.
Thank you.
Are there additional questions? Okay, I would just really challenge your team to really think creatively about what, if you came to this as part of this budget process, you come to this board with, to be able to get resources, what are the tools that we could implement that are out of the box to really reach to those, again, those students who, we're not reaching, and what can we do to get people back who we've lost? I think that's, a real opportunity. But what are the sort of things that we haven't done yet that we can do to reach them? And I know you guys are working so hard on this, but I think this board is prepared, and I think we're ready to support that type of innovation. So again,
Mr.
thank you.
Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, can I just want to put this in a larger context for a moment as it relates to the state of Arizona. Based on the information we have, all the districts are down. There's only one district that is up, but one district is down by about 30%. Most of the districts are right in what you saw for Pima numbers. So we're all struggling in this regard. So I just want you all to know we're not the outlier, but also we all recognize as a collective 10 districts that we've got to keep pushing to do better and figure out how we create opportunity, and the challenges have just been amplified because of the pandemic. And we're fortunate that we have a great team here, and with David and so many others.
Okay, I really appreciate it. Thank you guys, and thank you for your hard work. Okay, next we're moving on to item 1.4, remarks by, item 2.2, the reports by representatives to the board. I believe everybody is reporting this evening. So again, if you could just keep your comments to about 5 minutes. Our first is our student report with Sage Fakai-Maklu. Sage, are you with us this evening? Okay, if she is, we'll come back to her. Our next is our adjunct faculty report with Sean Mendoza.
Chancellor Klinko.
Yes.
Chairman Klinko, Chancellor Lambert, members of the board, and honored guests. 1 year into the pandemic, many of our concerns, both in and out of the classroom, continue to be focused on our health and safety of our students and the college community. When the chancellor recently shared the email on how to obtain COVID vaccines for employees, my thoughts went to my fellow colleagues whose status as employees can change with each semester. For example, if you've not received the COVID vaccination, one requirement is a verification of employment, per the website, of course. You can imagine how this may be a challenge to adjunct faculty who may have taught last fall but did not receive a spring contract due to low enrollment or canceled classes. I brought this concern forward to the provost, and I'm happy to report that the college will provide adjunct faculty who do not currently have spring contracts to access the COVID vaccine. It's yet another example of how the college administration and the board continues to support faculty and students. I thank you to the Provost Dolores Duran-Cerda and Chancellor Lambert for their continued support of adjunct faculty. That ends my report to the board.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mendoza. Next, we have our staff report with Michael Lopez. Mr. Lopez. Okay. We'll move on to our faculty report with Brooke Anderson. Ms. Anderson.
Good evening, Chairman Klinko, board members, honored guests, colleagues. The Senate has been busy since we last reported to the board in November. My report tonight highlights a few of our activities. In November, Senate President Josie Milliken organized a student panel. During the panel, students shared their perspectives with faculty senators. Hearing from students helps faculty reflect on the best ways to meet their needs, and President Milliken is planning to schedule another student panel for the Senate. In December, the Faculty Senate Systemic Justice Action Committee shared with faculty optional syllabus statements approved by the provost and Dr. Mitchell that emphasize equity and student well-being. A few of the statements the document includes are a recommended diversity, equity, and inclusion statement, an addendum to the attendance policy that takes into consideration the hardship students are facing due to the pandemic, a wellness statement, and a land acknowledgement statement. This spring, this committee will focus on equitable assessment practices. I presented on contract grading, which is an equitable assessment practice, at our December meeting to encourage faculty innovation and assessment. Next week, my colleague Frankie Rollins and I will be leading a 4-part virtual learning community through the TLC. In addition, I've met with the Chancellor, Provost, and Director of Faculty Affairs about how to best support faculty innovation and equitable assessment practices like contract grading. They have invited me to submit a proposal on this topic, and I'm currently working on it in collaboration with colleagues Josie Milliken, Frankie Rollins, and Elliot Sharia. We plan to submit this proposal by mid-semester and are hoping to implement these plans this fall. The college held its first virtual all-faculty day on January 12th. The Provost and TLC awarded 11 faculty with Striving for Excellence in Teaching awards. Faculty Senate President Josie Milliken and PCCEA President Matej Bogachak presented the Faculty Senate Fall 2020 survey results. The survey revealed that faculty have many concerns, some of which include concern regarding the lack of a process that allows faculty to provide yearly evaluative feedback to the college on supervisors and administrators. Trepidation and fear about the classification and compensation study, especially during this difficult time. A need for more support in professional development. The TLC has been an invaluable resource for faculty. Thankfully, it was implemented before the pandemic hit, and faculty are hungry for even more opportunities. To end the day, the college held open conversations about current events that provided faculty with an opportunity to talk about national events that occurred in January and the ongoing reality of the pandemic. This opportunity was repeated Wednesday and Thursday afternoons as part of All Faculty Week, which included informational and professional development offerings hosted by the TLC. As far as faculty notable accomplishments go, as you can see from this month's report, I can only highlight a few because there are too many to share orally with you here today. Generally speaking, you can see how hard at work our faculty are working to meet the needs of our students in creative and important ways. From workshops to public virtual events, publications, partnerships, and innovative pedagogical and curricular advancements. In particular, Dean Jan Kempster shared with me that Josie Milliken, Kim Lisa Duchisella, and Robert Foss made important contributions to Pima's Bellwether Award. They contributed to the narrative document that was included in Pima Online's Bellwether Award binder. On January 22nd, 2021, the Faculty Senate and the TLC developed and coordinated the first cross-discipline conversation, a series created for the purpose of sharing faculty projects and programs with other faculty and administration while fostering collaboration and cross-discipline work. In the session, panelists discuss how they have worked across disciplines to create a program for jobs that don't exist yet, including autonomous vehicle operators and drivers. Panelists included Jay Lau, Director of Transportation at Too Simple, Jim Craig, Dean of Business, and Missy Blair, Advanced Program Manager, Center for Transportation Training. Devin Marble moderated the session. The next event in the series will be about student involvement in our city's vaccination program. Brandy Wright, EMT faculty member, discipline coordinator, and program director, has received approval from the health department and TMC to utilize student volunteers for COVID-19 vaccine distribution. His cross-discipline conversation is scheduled for February 11th. In December 2020, a group of math faculty at Pima and UA joined Commit, a national network of regional committees of faculty who practice active and inquiry-based learning. Joining this network gives Pima's math department more visibility and networking opportunities at the state and national level, as well as access to NSF funding for many grants to promote inquiry and active learning. Dean Corson wanted to recognize math faculty member Kylie Seeger for leading this effort. Senate's next meeting is on February 5th, 2020. And while these meetings are open to the public, the Senate extends a personal invitation to board members. We would welcome and appreciate your presence as guests. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Anderson. Our final report is from our administrator, a report from Jeff Thies.
Good evening, Board Chair Klinko, board members, Chancellor Lambert, colleagues, and guests. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm Jeff Thies. I'm the Dean of College Readiness and Student Success at Pima. In this board report, I'm providing a snapshot of student success evidence from fall 2020. I'm describing a few of the academic support systems that are in place and were in place to support our students, and also touching base on a grant that the college is in partnership with the University of Arizona for STEM students. So a quick look at the PCC course success rates based on information pulled from Webby. You can see that the aggregate A through C or P for passing course rate in fall 20 was only 1 percentage point lower than fall 19. Some may feel a percentage point drop may be a negative thing, but considering the massive efforts that faculty, staff, and administration went through to convert over 50% of our courses from an in-person opportunity to the synchronous online version that we call virtual, I see this as a strong point for us. When you bifurcate the data to not online, it's a 2 percentage point drop. But again, keep in mind that that not online group is in person in fall 18 and 19, and then virtual or synchronous online in fall 20. And kudos to those that were not only overseeing, but teaching in the online, as that success rate jumped from 66% to 70% from fall 19 to fall 20. So kudos to all those that helped faculty prepare. Kudos to the faculty and staff and administrators that put forth this effort in the fall. At the same time, we also need to always look for continuous improvement. Our Latinx population still has a considerable gap between success rates. And in particular, when you look at our Latinx male population, they're 18 and 19-year-old, they had a 4 percentage point drop. But more concerning, 34% decrease in enrollment. So that was one of our subpopulations where we saw the greatest drop from the previous year. Moving on to some of our academic support opportunities, the learning centers. Worked with STAR last fall to correlate the success rates of students that attend any sort of support mechanism within the learning centers versus those that do not. And in all three scenarios, success in the course, persistence at the college, and retention or returning next year. The learning center students correlated to more success in all three of those areas. And that was also true when you worked across disciplines, ethnicities, age groups, gender, and the new to higher ed status. Learning centers currently are offering tutoring via the virtual learning center. We use Google Meet to do one-on-one tutoring sessions 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday. We've also significantly increased the number of embedded tutors. That's a more proactive, bringing the tutor to the classroom so they're part of the experience in the classroom and then part of the experience outside. And also, when I say outside, virtually, obviously, the paper drop-off and the American Sign Language labs are also available through the learning centers. Our biggest challenge for the learning centers is to continue to entice more students to take advantage of these services. Communication is out there through D2L, through faculty and syllabi. It's on the website, but continuing that message is something that we will focus on as we move forward. Testing and placement obviously shifted some priorities this summer. We worked to make sure we had ProctorU as an opportunity for students to be doing their proctored tests in the fall and the spring. And at the same time, Chelsea James and her staff were able to open up the downtown campus to serve our community and our students in a way to continue their education through providing GED testing, something that students had stopped being able to have access to back in March. And so by beginning of August, we were back online supporting our community with GED testing through Pearson VUE. We also provide CLEP tests that allow students to move forward in different classes in a testing format as opposed to taking classes. And then we also partner with external tests. For example, we have an Air Force group of paramedic graduates that needed to test in a proctored situation, and our testing center at the downtown campus was open and functioning in a way that provided those opportunities. And as a side perk, actually brings in revenue. Although the revenue was down a little bit, I'm sure you can all imagine why that was. Being closed from March through July limited some of our chances to support. Moving forward, what we're looking at to help increase that service is to look at our space design. It currently limits the way we can actually filter people in and out of the testing center at downtown campus and possibly opening up at other campuses as well. And the last academic support area that I'll mention is the library. Librarians were embedded in over 600 courses last fall, primarily writing, history, and psychology. The embedded librarians help students to develop skills in conducting research, evaluating the relevance, the credibility of the information, supporting both information and digital literacy as they go through. And not only were our librarians focused in the classroom in an embedded role, but they also continue to work to communicate directly with patrons using the virtual tools, their live chat, and the Ask a Librarian email. And recently the live chat was just extended to a 24/7 option by our librarians working through a co-op that's international and allows us to provide that library service 24/7 as opposed to our previous 40-hour work week. So that's a great new tool for students. They also are providing curbside pickup for library resources and are the main focus of administering the distribution of the technology tools, the laptops, the hotspots, etc. Some of the challenges are with the staffing, obviously in this trying to work virtually and on campus with some of these curbside and other pieces is the absence of some of the student workers that historically would have supported the libraries. And so hopefully with some of the Carissa Acts, we'll be able to bring back some of the federal work study students in those opportunities that we all know are a best practice opportunity for students to be able to work for the college that they're attending. And last but not least, our Pima University of Arizona STEM grant, that 26 is now up to 29. based on some of the diligent work that's been done over the last 3 weeks since this was turned in. The students that are part of this program, they have to be STEM students, so Associates of Science at Pima. They get up to an $8,000 scholarship their second year with us or their final year with us, depending on how their part-time, full-time status is. And then they're able to turn around and pick up a scholarship for the remaining 2.5 years at the University of Arizona, around the range of $10,000 per year to cover tuition and expenses. And we currently have, of the 29 students, 16 are female, so over half in STEM are female. That's a great sign. 2/3 are students of color, and 2/3 are also first-generation students. So as that grant continues to increase, you'll see success of moving our students through that STEM pipeline onto the U of A. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Our next item is item 2.3, the Chancellor's report. Chancellor Lambert.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to say, first and foremost, thank you to all the faculty, staff, administrators, the board, and our students for your incredible patience and resiliency as we continue through this very difficult period of time. I mean, I had the great pleasure of watching the cross-disciplinary conversation piece that Brooke was referring to earlier. Just a fabulous example of the transformation that's been underway at Pima, to go from a concept that we talk about in terms of reality of Industry 4.0, the 4 superpowers, and the human plus machine reality, and to take that and work with a partner like Too Simple, and then the process that went leading up to creation of the first ever autonomous vehicle driver program in the nation is just a prime example of how transformation and change works. And I look forward to many more of these conversations as they go forward. So kudos to the Faculty Senate, the Provost, the Teaching and Learning Center, and all that were involved in that. Also, we have so much to be proud of. This past week, we had 5 of our programs featured as a bellwether finalist. And that is unprecedented. You know, since my time as a CEO, I don't think I've ever seen, and Morgan can correct me if I'm wrong, a single college district, not a multi-college district, but a single college district like ours, have 5 programs represented. And that's something to be proud of. But more importantly, it reflects the fact that our employees, faculty, staff, administration, and the board have bought into the vision of being a premier institution committed to student success, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and community engagement. You don't get to that level of success without a majority of folks buying into that kind of vision. It just doesn't happen. But it wasn't just the bellwethers. We've also been recognized by Aspen as a top 150 community college. So can you imagine, just a few short years ago, Pima was on the brink of going in the opposite direction. And we have turned it around, and we've turned it around in a short period of time. So I just want to say, I'm just proud to everybody who was involved in that. And I know not everybody got to be the ones presenting, and I recognize that there are a lot of people behind the scenes to bring about that success. It is truly a team effort. And as long as we're each doing our part, this is what we can continue to do as an institution. Just want to say a little something about COVID. I mean, I think we all want to get back to our campuses, to our offices. We all want to get back to what is more normal. We all want to be able to compete in athletics. We want to be in the classrooms. We want to be in the labs. And I wish that for all of us. But the reality is, as Dr. Garcia said earlier today, we're just not there yet. That there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It'll be a new normal. It won't be like it was before we went. But we just have to continue to be patient. We've got to see the case rates coming down. And today, just this week in the news, we heard that TUSD lost 6 employees to COVID. That's what's on the line. And I want us not to lose sight of that. So maybe we're a little too conservative, but what's the alternative? 6 deaths of employees? I mean, what are we willing to trade off? So I just want you all to know that I've been very conservative in terms of how we've been running the institution, in terms of how we manage this COVID crisis. And it's hard on all of us. And I recognize that, but I also want to say to the folks who, are athletes, and we really appreciate your commitment to your sport. We appreciate your commitment to your education. Also, we also appreciate your patience as we go through this. And we will continue to look at the caseloads and determine what makes sense for Pima Community College. And based on what Dr. Garcia said tonight, I think there's hope as we move through the balance of this month that we might be able to start opening up competition again. I just hope that that downward trend continues and I'm really more willing to be flexible as that starts to happen. Also, I'm just so proud of our work, Jewel Nadeau and Jim Craig and the faculty in our Center of Excellence for Hospitality and Culinary. So Jewel sits on the City of Gastronomy Board. They just recently launched a certification for our area restaurants and businesses tied to hospitality to really recognize the excellence, and that our Pima Community College was part of supporting in the creation of that certification. And so just know that we are leading the way in our community in many, many areas. Also, Dr. Nick Richmond will be taking a different approach to the Futures Conference this year. We're going to break it up into smaller sessions. And so she'll be sending out an update on the schedule of events. Again, we're taking a different approach to how we normally do things, but we're still committed to being accessible to the community for their feedback on the direction and vision of the college. And I just want to close by mentioning, thank you to Jeffrey Lanuez for filling in our HR role. He stepped in a very difficult time. We were so pleased that we have been able to hire Carlene Thompson. Hopefully I got Carlene's last name right. And she will be joining us next week. And when she's on board, I'll look forward to giving her a proper introduction to the board at the next meeting. So with that, that is my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chancellor Lambert. And I just want to, echo what you said about the Bellwether Awards. It was so incredibly inspiring to sit through the presentations and see the real innovative work that we're doing that's transforming the lives of individuals in our community. And it is inspiring. And everybody who, if you haven't seen those presentations, take the time to go online and watch them. And congratulations to all of the amazing faculty and staff who've worked so hard to innovate and create these programs. Next, we have information items. Item 3. Mr. Sylvan, could you read the information items?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd be glad to. The information items for this evening's meeting that were included in the board materials include the financial reports for November 2020, employment information, which includes 1 hire, I believe was 4 retirements and about a dozen separations. Next item is faculty hiring. This is identifying 3 individuals who had been serving as adjunct faculty who will be serving for 1 semester as regular faculty. Those are provisional hires. We do that because of uncertainty about what the ongoing enrollment and course needs will be. Next, we have the list of individuals who have been certified as qualified to serve as adjunct faculty at Pima College. Next, we have the 2021-2022 academic year course fees. And finally, we have the first reading of 3 proposed board policy revisions. The first is the board policy regarding academic freedom. That's a new board policy. The next is 1 on financial controls and institutional budget. And finally, 1 on cash reserves. Actually, these are all more recent board policies. And so these are now open for comment. They're going through the different governance groups. Then once that process has concluded, we will come back to the board with a summary of what the feedback was, any suggested changes, and then the board can consider that and decide what the final version for adoption should look like.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Sylvan. The next is our consent agenda. Could you read the consent items?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first items on the consent agenda all relate to meetings that happened in 2021. The first are the minutes from the January 13th executive session. Second are the minutes from the January 13th regular meeting. Next, we have the minutes from the January 19th study session. The next item is a proposed amendment to a dual enrollment agreement with Lourdes Catholic High School to add additional courses. Next, we have a proposed intergovernmental agreement with the Arizona Office of Economic Opportunity to allow Pima College to participate in a statewide data collection and analysis effort that will attempt to better link education and workforce data. Next, we have a proposed intergovernmental agreement with the Pima County Health Department. This is to allow students in a variety of programs at Pima College, healthcare, sports science, and other programs to participate in clinical and hands-on experiential opportunities with the county. And finally, we have an intergovernmental agreement with the Greer Fire District to provide training in the area of paramedic.
Do I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved.
So moved. I think that was Ms. Garcia. Did I hear that correctly? Is there a second? Anyone a second?
Second.
Dr. Hay. Okay, all in favor of approval of the consent agenda, signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay, hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Next is our action items. The first is our notice of intent to amend the bylaws and discussion. Mr. Sylvan, could you read the item?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me just explain what this is. So in accordance with the bylaws, when there's a proposal to amend the bylaws, one of the steps is that public notice at a regular meeting is given. So that's what we're doing with this. The proposed text of the bylaw amendment accompanies the board materials. And essentially what it would do is change the current term of board officers, which are 2 years, to 1 year. And there's also a provision that essentially recommending that terms not that there not be more than 2 consecutive terms, although any of the parameters in related to terms could be waived by a majority of the board. So that's the proposed bylaw amendment. The decision that's before the board this evening is at what subsequent meeting would you like to have the more substantive discussion and the vote on this item?
So, Mr. Sylvan, I would move, to the board that we put this on our next regular scheduled meeting in March.
So I have a question. Is that to vote for it?
Yes, that would be to vote, but we have a motion. Is there a second?
I second it.
Okay, you second it, so it would be in March. Okay, is there any discussion on the item? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, anyone opposed? Okay, hearing none, the motion passes unanimously and it'll be on our regular March agenda. The next item is the naming opportunity in honor of Dr. Sylvia Lee. Mr. Sylvan, could you read the recommendation?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For this item, the Chancellor recommends that the governing board consider the naming of the Student Services Center at the Pima Community College Northwest Campus in honor of Dr. Sylvia Lee.
I will move the item. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Discussion? Is there any discussion from the board on this item? Okay, I will just say prior to the vote, Dr. Lee really made an incredible sacrifice to this institution. She retired early because of her concerns about the direction the institution was going. And she gave tremendous amount of service and commitment to this institution in her board role to help correct the ship when things were headed in a very seriously negative direction. And through her leadership and her guidance, I think she really helped correct course for this institution. And it is a small acknowledgement of that tremendous gift that she gave to our community through her time and through her early retirement. Additionally, she broke numerous barriers in this community and in leadership across the state. She's, I think, worthy of this type of recognition. And if there's no more discussion, okay. So we have a motion on the floor. All in favor of the vote signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Oppose.
Oppose.
Okay. The vote passes 3-2 with Member Garcia and Member Gonzalez dissenting.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
can I just offer some parting thoughts? And probably because none of the 5 current board members were here at the time that I arrived. Dr. Sylvia Lee has a lot to do with the current governance model of the college, because the college didn't really have a very effective governance model. Thanks to her leadership, we have policy governance, which is a best practice across the entire country. Her tireless effort to make sure that this college did not go in the direction it was headed, which was on a going out of the business curve, because the college was placed on probation twice. That's very rare for an institution to be placed on probation twice. So just one is bad, but twice you can just imagine. But the other things that folks didn't realize back then, the institution was also on probation with the Department of Education, the US Department, because of its loan default rates. And the college had all but blown its ability to certify veterans benefits for a community that is about the armed services and our veterans. So there's so much here that we couldn't articulate in these materials, but for her tireless commitment. So this is an exceptional individual. And I'm just so pleased that the board is honoring her. It's the least we could do. These were not ordinary times. They were extraordinary times, and not in a good way. So I think she deserves all that we can do to recognize her. Thank you.
And we have a comment from Ms. Ripley.
Hi, yes, thank you so much. So for clarity to the other panelists, it's the Northwest Campus Student Services Center, which, please correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Lee had a significant part in creating, is that correct? And it's the Student Services Center, which is not an entire building, but it's the center part of the admin building, is that correct?
Board Member Ripley, that is correct. It is the center area of the campus for the students. So it is not a building, it's not a room, it's the space and area where the center is located.
Okay.
Yeah, Chancellor, to be exact, it's just that first floor section of the B building at Northwest Campus.
Okay. Thank you all so much. I look forward to a dedication ceremony when we can be together, hopefully in the fall. Finally, we have item 5.3, which is a contract with Follett Higher Education Group contract amendment. Mr. Sylvan, could you read the recommendation?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So for our last action item this evening, the Chancellor recommends the Governing Board authorize the Chancellor or designee to execute an amendment to the agreement with Follett Higher Education Group for bookstore, food service, and vending services management. The amendment changes the commission structure and the service delivery model and extends the current agreement by 1 year to June 30, 2020. Just for information purposes, a summary of what the changes would be like are contained in the board report, and the text of the proposed amendment is attached.
Okay, is there a motion to adopt the recommendation?
So moved.
Okay, moved by Dr. Hay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Garcia. Is there any discussion? or do we want a deeper presentation on the information?
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
we had prepared a brief presentation for you. I wanted the board to understand the overall context of what's happening with, in this case, our bookstore and food service operation, and why this is of critical and urgent importance. So I'll ask Dave B, Dr. B to take you through that if you don't mind.
Yep, that sounds terrific. Dr. B.
Good evening again. As Chancellor Lambert mentioned, that there's a sort of a greater context going on that's underlying the recommended amendment that the board has in front of them to act on today. Over time, in the last 10 to 15 years, there's been a pretty sizable change in the college store environment, particularly in the stores that aren't like your Big 10 or Pac-12 schools that have large amounts of sales for college branded merchandise. Even those institutions are experiencing challenges, but the other store environments have pretty significant pressures. So I want to start and I'm going to go through these, I think, relatively quickly, but I want to kind of explain the business model of college stores and what the big challenges are. So if you take the basically cost versus sales perspective, the top part of this slide indicates the cost pressures that these stores experience. One is basically the cost of goods sold. That would be as food prices increase, they either have to increase the prices or they absorb the cost increase and their margins decrease. On the book side, what we see and the bigger issue that we talk about and the bigger priority at the institution is the challenge of publishers increasing costs and changing the model so that that students are forced to buy new textbooks and or they're forced to buy bundled packages that have software that may or may not be needed. The college has taken, I think, a great initiative to move towards open educational resources. You may recall that in the past, there's been reference to saving more than $1 million. I think it's more than $1 million a year in terms of the things that we've done to decrease costs to students through open educational resources. Well, one of the impacts that has is that's great for students. It does not help the publishers, but it also doesn't then flow through the bookstores. And so sales at the bookstores go down dramatically. And then the other challenge that they have is on the cost side is staffing costs. And the big challenge that we have at our institution is we have multiple campuses. It's the same issue we talked about, the inefficiency of the staffing model by having so many different locations. The sort of national standard for a sustainable store is sales in the neighborhood of $500,000 at a particular location. Because we're so spread out, our sales in total are okay to have a sort of a viable structure, but because it's spread out between the 5 different locations, you have what is in reality 3 locations that fall below that $500,000 threshold. Now, compounding that are other things that are specific to the college or to the national trends, which is that as students have moved online, as the information about textbooks has been more readily available to them, that was something that came out of the Higher Education Reauthorization Act a number of years ago, where ISBN numbers were required to provide them to students. The students can go online and find the books. If students are online, it might be much easier for them to just keep clicking and look at Amazon and try and find their text that way, rather than going through the on-site text, the bookstore. On top of that, the college, as you know, has experienced pretty dramatic enrollment declines. And when you compound the enrollment declines over the last number of years with the fact that we've also had increases in online enrollment, you realize that our foot traffic that goes to these stores has declined dramatically. There's no way around it. We've talked about this with the board for a number of years, that the expectations of the sales are going down and that it's going to continue, and that we're going to have to probably come up with a new model going forward. That all got accelerated with COVID. And now the stores have essentially no student foot traffic. And thus Follett and other bookstore contractors across the country are going back to colleges and renegotiating. So that's where the amendment comes from. They are basically in a situation where they need to change the terms of the agreement in order to stay viable. We negotiated with them, I think had a series of progressive negotiations with them that resulted in what the recommended amendment is. This chart it outlines what I was saying. It contrasts or compares the changes in enrollment. The top line is our FTSE enrollment over since 2011, how it's declined. The gray enrollment is if you factor in the on-site, so that's taking away the online enrollments and taking that out of the mix. So you say, well, the students who would be more likely to use the on-site bookstores are those who are actually on-site. So you can see how that has gone down over time. And then you see that what this is gross sales over that period of time. So we used to have sales that were in the neighborhood of $11 million. Now it's significantly less than $4 million. And then you can see in order to keep that kind of an operation viable, you have problems. So that gets to where our amendment is. And Mr. Sylvan, I think, summarized the key changes pretty well. It reduces the commission structure just a little bit from 11% to 10%. The changes in terms of on-site locations, it will trigger when the students are back on campus is when this will actually trigger. So they're right now, they just have an on-site online presence. They're providing bookstore services online. We're working on getting them to have the ability for students to come pick up their books and have that kind of service available. But as our students are not on site, or only a very small minority of them are on site, we do not have open stores. So when we get above a threshold, and just to give you an idea of that threshold, when we were talking about the plan A, B, and C earlier, that this is actually going to trigger the opening in the stores will trigger when we get back to a more normal environment. So that's like a plan A. So think about it, that the new commission structure or the changes to this agreement in terms of changing what locations are open is actually going to take, they will be visible to students at the earliest. We're talking about, if based on the conversation earlier, at the earliest would be fall, and potentially it could be spring. So we're talking about 1 or 2 terms in this new amendment structure. They are committed, Follett's committed to having as good a service as possible, online, pop-up services, those kinds of things. But what they are looking to do is consolidate the Desert Vista campus from 2 locations. So there's a food location and a book location, and consolidating it to be a 1 location. It would be closing the Northwest Campus store, providing pop-up services at the beginning and end of terms, and then having enhanced vending options for students at the Northwest Campus. And then at West Campus, we talked to them about continuing to have both a cafe and a bookstore where they have separate locations. But if we have both locations up, we forego $8,300 per month, which is basically covering the extra staffing costs they have to do that. So what going forward, this amendment gets us to June of 2022. What we have put in place now is we have 2 task forces working on envisioning future services for the college. So the future state of our bookstore and book services and our food services going forward. We have 2 separate groups trying to come up with a vision of what they would like to see. And then what we'll do is we will roll that information and those desires. It's inclusive groups. It will have students, has faculty, et cetera. Roll that information into requests for proposals, develop that in the fall of this, so this coming fall, and then roll those out on the street to identify new vendors, or identify a new contract structure. It could be the same vendor, but identify the best provider for those services to take effect for fall of 2022. So we have a plan in place. It's already in action for how to get the services to be the ideal services that are serving the college's needs. And this amendment sort of bridges that gap in the best way possible.
Okay, are there any questions from the board? Ms. Ripley, it looks like you have your hand raised. Is that from, okay, no, okay. Are there any questions from anyone else? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay, hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Item number 6, a request for future agenda items. Are there any requests from the board? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Gonzalez. You are muted, sir.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to, for the next agenda item, I really would like to look at very carefully reference to the PCC and IGA with Pasco Yaqui. Last week and this week, we've been getting, there's too many unanswered questions, and I think we need to really look at that where we're at. We're approaching a year with it, but I think we need to really come and look what's going on. I know that they have a lot of unanswered questions, and that's one thing that I would like to put on the next agenda item for next month.
Okay, I believe there is an item where I mean, I think it probably will be on a future agenda. So we'll touch base with you about getting it, when we're going to get it on, so it's sort of in alignment.
Chairman,